Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I'm so glad you're with us today.
Glad to be here.
We have a massive text to get into. We are cracking open Genesis chapter 18.
A very familiar one.
It is. I mean, if you've spent any time in church, you know the first half of this chapter. It's that classic scene by the Urks of Mamre.
Right, with the three visitors.
Exactly. Abraham's sitting there in the heat of the day. These three men show up, and there's this rush of hospitality. Sarah's making cakes. Abraham is running to the herd to get a calf.
It feels very domestic, very intimate. It's the scene where Sarah laughs at the promise of a son. It's a stunning picture of grace.
It really is.
You have the Lord appearing to Abraham, eating with him, renewing all these covenant promises. It feels like everything is right with the world.
But
then the scene shifts. The camera angle moves, you could say. The meal's over, the sun is setting, and the men get up to leave. And all of a sudden, we're not talking about birth and laughter anymore.
No, we're staring down the barrel of total destruction.
The whole text just pivots. It pivots hard.
The visitors, who we know are angels, with the Lord in a temporary physical form, they look down towards Sodom. And this sets the stage for what I think is one of the most misunderstood conversations in the entire Bible.
I would agree.
I have heard so many sermons that portray Abraham's intercession here as a kind of negotiation.
The haggling metaphor.
The haggling metaphor gets framed like a flea market transaction. I'll give you 50, no. How about 40, you know?
That's the standard Sunday school take, isn't it? That this is a story about being bold enough to bargain with God.
Right.
But when you actually study this, especially through the lens of Reformed theology, that reading just falls apart.
It really does.
This is not a marketplace. This is a courtroom. It's a high-stakes legal drama. Abraham isn't haggling over the price of a rug. He's acting as legal counsel in a capital case.
And the judge.
And the judge he's addressing is the judge of all the earth.
Wow. That framing changes the entire mood of the passage. We're moving from the Oaks of Mamre, which stands for life and covenant intimacy, to this overlook facing Sodom, which is all about death and judgment.
It's a jarring shift.
Yeah.
And the mission for our discussion today is to really analyze what Abraham is actually doing here. We want to look at this intercession as a forensic appeal.
A forensic appeal.
Yeah, an appeal based entirely on God's character.
Yeah.
And in doing that, we need to see how this text harmonizes justice and mercy, how it exposes the total depravity of the human heart, and why it proves that we need a better mediator than Abraham.
So let's get into the text itself. The setup here is so crucial. In verse 22, you see this spatial separation happening. The men, the two angels, they turn and walk toward Sodom. But the text says Abraham still stood before the Lord.
That phrase, stood before, is doing a lot of heavy lifting in the original Hebrew.
Tell us about that.
It's a mad liftney. This isn't just, loitering or waiting around. In the ancient Near East, this is technical language. It describes the posture of a servant waiting for a command from his master, or, more specifically, an official standing in a royal court. Abraham is taking a formal stance.
So he's assuming a position.
He is. A position of service and attention. And then the text says he drew near. The verb for that is nagash.
Nagash. I feel like I've seen that word before. In the Joseph narrative, maybe.
You did. That's a great catch. It's used when Judah approaches Joseph, who he thinks is this powerful Egyptian ruler, to plead for his brother Benjamin.
Wow.
It's also used in priestly context for approaching the altar, so it signifies stepping forward for advocacy, the bold, deliberate movement into the inner circle.
So Abraham is not a bystander just watching the world burn.
Not at all. He has been admitted into the divine council. He's a friend of God.
Which is just mind-blowing when you think about it. God actually pauses his plan to reveal it to a human being.
It is. In verse 17, God asks this rhetorical question, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do?"
It implies God debated it, or at least he wanted us to see the question. I mean, God is about to wipe a city-state off the map. He's sovereign. He doesn't need a permission slip. So why tell Abraham?
It's certainly not because God needs advice.
Right?
The text gives us the reason. God has chosen Abraham so that he might command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice.
Ah, so that's the key.
That is the key. God reveals the judgment because he is training Abraham. He needs Abraham, and through him, all of us, to understand what divine justice actually looks like.
So the destruction of Sodom isn't some outburst of divine rage.
No, it's not God losing his temper. It's a holy, calculated, and necessary reaction to pervasive sin. By bringing Abraham into the loop, God is vindicating his own character before the gavel drops.
He wants Abraham to know that the judge is just, But this brings up a huge theological hurdle that I think a lot of people trip over.
The sovereignty question.
The sovereignty question. If God is sovereign, and if the outcry against Sodom has already reached him, the verdict seems set. So why pray? Isn't it just fatalism to say, well, God decreed it, so my prayer is pointless?
That's a really lazy view of sovereignty, though.
How so?
Well, fatalism says the blueprint is drawn, so I'm just going to take a nap. Biblical faith says God is the architect, and he has graciously invited me to work on the site with him.
That's a great way to put it.
Abraham standing before the Lord completely contradicts fatalism. He prays with the conviction that God actually hears and responds. But it also contradicts presumption.
Meaning he doesn't just charge in?
Exactly. He doesn't storm into the throne room demanding his rights. He waits. He asks. He is active, but he's incredibly reverent. He knows he's dusting in ashes, yet he still steps into the legal chamber to present a defense.
And that defense, it begins with a question that echoes through the rest of the Bible. Verse 23. Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?
This is the absolute heart of his forensic appeal. And we need to be really precise with our terms here. Okay. When Abraham says righteous, the Hebrew is Sadiq, he's referring to someone in right standing with the law. Someone innocent of the capital charges brought against the city.
And the wicked.
The wicked, Rasha, means the guilty. Those characterized by impiety and criminal looseness. And that verb, sweep away Safa, it implies indiscriminate destruction.
Like wiping a table clean without sorting the good from the bad.
Precisely.
So Abraham is not asking for amnesty. He isn't saying, God, please ignore the fact that these people are, well, monsters.
Not at all. And that's a vital distinction.
Yeah.
He isn't asking God to overlook sin. He is asking God to distinguish between categories.
His argument is a moral one.
It's strictly moral. He is saying, in effect, God, if you drop fire on the whole city and kill the innocent along with the guilty, you will look like the pagan gods.
The gods of the Canaanites or the Babylonians?
Exactly. The gods of the surrounding nations were capricious. They were unpredictable. I mean, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods flood the whole earth just because humans were being too noisy and kept them awake.
So Abraham is challenging Yahweh, saying, you are not like them.
Yes. And he uses incredibly strong language to do it. In verse 25, he says, far be it from you.
It sounds so intense in English.
It's even more so in Hebrew. The word is chalila. It's an exclamation of horror. It essentially means profane. He's saying it would be a profanity for you to act this way.
Wow.
Abraham is acting as a theologian here. He's arguing that for God to be unjust is a theological impossibility. He's appealing to God's very nature. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? Or, more literally, do mishpat.
This connects to a classic philosophical problem, doesn't it? The Euthyphro dilemma.
It does.
Is something right because God wills it, or does God will it because it's right?
And that's the battle between what's called voluntarism and essentialism. Voluntarism is the idea that good is just whatever God decides in the moment.
So if God decided tomorrow that hating your neighbor was good, then hate would become good.
Under a strict voluntarist view, yes. It suggests God's will is arbitrary, that is untethered to any fixed nature or standard.
Which is terrifying. It makes God a tyrant who just makes up the rules as he goes.
It's a nightmare scenario, really. It removes all stability from the universe. But this text flatly refutes that view.
How so?
Abraham is arguing from essentialism, or realism. He's saying that God wills what is right because he is, in his very essence, eternally righteous.
So God is bound by his own perfection.
He is. He cannot act against his own nature any more than he can cease to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham isn't holding God to some standard outside of God. He's asking God to be consistent with himself. He's asking the judge to be the rule.
Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? It's a rhetorical question, but the answer has to be yes.
It must be yes. If the answer is no, then gravity falls apart, moral law falls apart, everything collapses.
So he appeals to the standard of the law that flows from God's nature.
Right. He isn't asking for a favor. He's asking for mishpat, for justice. And here's where the brilliance of the text really shines. Because by asking God to apply strict justice to distinguish the righteous from the wicked, Abraham is actually setting up a devastating discovery.
And this leads us to the countdown.
The countdown.
We start at 50. Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. And God replies, if I find 50, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Then Abraham goes to 45, 40, 30, 20, and finally 10. This is the part everyone calls haggling.
Right.
But if we drop that metaphor, what is actually happening here?
Okay, think of Abraham as a defense attorney. He's probing the evidence during a deposition.
Okay, I like that.
He's testing the mercy of the court, yes, but he's also testing the moral state of his client, the city. He's trying to find the floor of its depravity.
He starts high with 50.
50, that's a respectable number. If there are 50 decent men in a city, surely that city has a future. And God agrees. But then Abraham pauses. You can almost see him doing the math in his head. He looks at what he knows of Sodom and he realizes 50 might be a stretch.
It feels like a slow dawning horror for him. He isn't negotiating the price down. He's realizing the inventory simply isn't there.
That is it. Exactly. And this brings us face to face with the doctrine of total depravity.
From the Westminster Confession.
Yes. The confession describes unregenerate humanity as wholly defiled in all the parts and faculties. Now, we often think depravity means every person is as bad as they could possibly be. That every neighbor is a serial killer.
Right, but that's not what it means.
No. Technically, it means that sin's corruption has infected every part of us, our mind, our will, our emotions. And in Sodom, that corruption is total. This was a major city-state. It wasn't a tiny village. And yet, Abraham realizes he might not even find 10 men who aren't participants in its wickedness.
And 10 is a significant number in Jewish tradition, isn't it? The minyan.
It is. The term comes later, but the concept is rooted right here. 10 is a quorum. It's the smallest number needed to constitute a community. If you have 10, you have a congregation. If you have fewer than 10, you just have a few isolated individuals.
So he's looking for a remnant that can preserve the corporate identity of the city.
He is. And this shows us what you could call the mathematics of mercy. God is willing to spare the whole place for the sake of just a few.
That's a staggering display of grace right there. God was willing to let thousands of wicked people continue living just so that 50 or even 10 righteous people wouldn't be swept away.
It is the remnant principle. The righteous act as a preservative. They're the salt holding back the decay. But the terrifying part of this whole dialogue is what happens at 10.
And at the countdown,
Abraham asks, suppose 10 are found there? And God says, I will not destroy it if I find 10.
Yeah.
And then silence.
Abraham stops asking.
He stops.
Why? Why not ask for 5? Why not just ask for Lot and his family specifically?
Because I think Abraham realizes he's hit the absolute floor. If there aren't even 10 righteous men, the argument for corporate preservation becomes legally invalid. You can't ask a judge to save an entire city-state for the sake of 2 or 3 people who probably want to leave anyway.
At that point, the corruption is absolute.
It's absolute. The city is essentially dead already. The fire is just the cremation.
So the silence that follows, that's the verdict.
That is the verdict. And this is so crucial. Sodom is destroyed not because God lacked mercy. He agreed to spare it for just 10, but because the 10 did not exist.
It's the death knell for Pelagianism.
It is. The idea that humans are inherently good or can fix themselves if you just give them enough time. Abraham probes the city for righteousness, and the result is 0. Well, nearly 0.
And there's Lot.
There is Lot, but as we see in chapter 19, Lot has to be dragged out by his collar. He isn't saving the city. He barely gets saved himself as through fire, as the apostle would say.
It really refutes that modern notion that if we just educate people enough or fix the economic structures, society will perfect itself.
Genesis 18 says no. A culture can reach a point of moral 0, wholly defiled. It exposes the spiritual bankruptcy of man. Abraham stops asking because he knows the defense has rested. There's no more evidence to present.
This paints a pretty bleak picture of humanity. We have a righteous, holy judge and a city with 0 righteousness to its name. If the story ends there, we're all in serious trouble.
We are.
But as Reformed thinkers, we know the Old Testament is always pointing forward. So how do we connect this to Christ?
We have to view Abraham here as a type, a shadow of the great high priest. He's an intercessor. He stands between the wrath of God and the objects of that wrath. But he's an imperfect intercessor. He is, as he admits, just dust and ashes.
So what's the primary contrast between Abraham's intercession and Christ's?
It's the basis of the plea. Look at Abraham's logic. It's all conditional. If I find 50, if I find 40, he is trying to leverage human merit.
He's trying to find something good in the people.
He is. He's saying, God, there's something good down there, so please hold back your hand. He's looking for a reason in the sinner to save the sinner.
And he runs out of reasons.
Precisely. The countdown hits 0. But Christ's plea is not based on our merit at all. It's based on his own finished work.
Right.
He doesn't say, Father, forgive them, because there are 10 good guys among them. He says, Father, forgive them. And he bases that petition on his own perfect sacrifice.
So Abraham counts down to 10 and stops. He goes back to his place, And the fire falls.
But Christ counts down to zero, to the absolute moral zero of the human heart. And he doesn't walk away. He steps in.
That is the shift. Abraham seeks preservation, spare the wicked for the sake of the righteous. But Christ offers substitution.
That is the gospel logic in a nutshell. Abraham asks, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? And the answer we get at the cross is, no. I will sweep away the righteous one instead of the wicked.
The judge of all the earth did do right.
He did. He satisfied justice. But he did it by taking the penalty upon himself in the person of the Son.
So in Genesis 18, Abraham hoped that Lot's righteousness, whatever small amount there was, would shield Sodom. But in the New Testament, we talk about imputation.
Right. Lot's righteousness was barely enough to shield Lot himself. It certainly couldn't cover the city. But Christ's perfect righteousness is imputed to the ungodly, as Romans 4.5 tells us. It's a shield that actually works.
And it's permanent.
It's permanent. Unlike Abraham, who was dust and ashes and eventually died, Hebrews 7 tells us that Jesus holds his priesthood permanently. He always lives to make intercession. He never has to stop at 10. He never has to return to his place in defeat. He sits at the right hand of the Father, having secured the verdict.
The gospel answers the question that Genesis 18 leaves hanging in the air. Where is the righteousness?
It isn't in us.
It's in Christ.
That is it. And that changes everything about how we view judgment. The judge judged the mediator so that the defendants could go free.
So let's bring this home. What does this mean for us today? We have the theology, we have the typology. How do we apply this? We usually talk about head, heart, and hands.
Let's start with the head then, the doctrine. This text must vindicate God's justice in our minds.
What do you mean by that?
We live in an age of theological liberalism that wants a God of pure affirmation with no wrath, or open theism, which claims God doesn't know the future and is just sort of negotiating as he goes, surprised by the outcome.
Genesis 18 completely shuts that down.
Completely. God knows the outcome.
Yeah.
He is the judge of all the earth. We have to affirm the reality of hell and divine retribution. If we don't believe God is just, we won't value the cross.
That's a strong connection. If Sodom didn't deserve to burn, then Jesus didn't need to die.
Exactly. We have to have the theological backbone to say God's judgment is measured and it is right.
That's a hard truth, but a necessary one. Okay, so what about the heart, our affections? It's so easy to look at the Sodoms of our own culture and just get angry or disgusted.
It is. It's easy to slide into self-righteousness. Look at those terrible sinners over there. But look at Abraham. He stood there and he pleaded. He didn't celebrate the coming destruction.
And Lot.
And Lot. 2 Peter 2.7 says he was tormented in his righteous soul. He wasn't indifferent, but he wasn't gleeful either. He was in agony.
Compassionate agony. We should be tormented by the sin we see, not just annoyed by it.
We should fear the judgment enough to flee it ourselves and love our neighbors enough to warn them. If we truly believe what we said about the head, that judgment is real and just, then our heart should break for the lost. We shouldn't just be culture warriors destroying enemies. We should be intercessors pleading for their souls.
Which leads us to the hands, the practice. What do we actually do?
Well, first, intercessory prayer. We need to recover the art of drawing near. We need to pray for the restraint of evil in our cities. We need to pray for the salvation of the elect. And we need to use Abraham's arguments, pray based on God's character. Lord, for the sake of your great name, show mercy.
And we also need to confront idols. The commentaries we looked at mention specific things. Materialism, sexual anarchy.
We can't be afraid to name the sins of the time. Sodom had specific sins. Our culture has specific sins. We name them not to condemn people to hell, but to offer the only remedy, which is Christ.
But we have to be distinct.
We must be distinct. You cannot intercede for Sodom if you're pitching your tent toward Sodom.
That refers to Lot again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He got too close.
He did. He hesitated when the angels told him to run. We cannot be indistinguishable from the world. If we're just like the culture, we have no platform from which to warn the culture. We need to live as sojourners, just as Abraham did.
And finally, that leaves evangelism.
The countdown stopped. That's the haunting reality of this chapter. There is no safety in numbers. People think, well, everyone else is doing it. Surely God won't judge us all. Genesis 18 says, yes, he will.
So we have to preach Christ before the clock runs out.
We have to. We have to tell people that the only safety is not in the crowd, but in the mediator.
It's a heavy message, but in the end, it's a hopeful one because of Christ.
That is the only hope.
As we wrap up, let's look at how the narrative ends. Verse 33. And the Lord went his way, and Abraham returned to his place.
It's so quiet. The intercession is over. The next morning, the smoke rose. Abraham looked out and he saw the destruction. Very somber ending to the chapter.
It does leave us with a final thought to chew on, though.
It does. Genesis 18 leaves us with this haunting question. Where is the righteousness that can save a city?
It wasn't in Sodom.
It wasn't in Sodom, and it wasn't even in Abraham. He was just a man of dust. The silence at the end of that chapter is deafening, and it's only broken centuries later by the voice of the Son of God.
We survive the judgment not because we're one of the 50.
And not because we're lucky. We survive because we're hidden in the one righteous man.
That's the only place to stand. Thank you for walking us through this. It really transforms a familiar story into something so solid for our faith.
It has been my pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking. We encourage you to go read Genesis 18 again with these fresh eyes. Rest in the Judge, who is also your Savior. We'll see you next time.